Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Sabin, Tourism Coordinator at Monona Terrace Community and Convention Center in beautiful Madison, Wisconsin. We have a beautiful summer day here of about 78 degrees and some sun. It's lovely out, which is why I'm so pleased to see that we have such robust registration and viewership today. Thank you so much for joining us to this special summer edition of the Right Design Series. Our lecture today is sponsored by the organization Right in Wisconsin, and we regret that a representative from that organization could not be with us today, but I'm going to speak for Brian, the president. That organization, Right in Wisconsin, works to promote, protect, and preserve the heritage of Frank Lloyd Wright, his vision and his architecture, as well as the work of his apprentices and like-minded architects. And one of the ways they fulfill this mission is through a house tour fundraiser called Right and Like. After a pause during COVID, that tour is resuming this year in Madison. And I wanted to let this audience know that it will happen from 9 to 5 on Saturday, July 30th. So please know that that tour includes 4 homes designed by Wright and 4 homes designed by apprentices and like-minded architects, including Herb Fritz and Herb DeLevy. Are $60 for Right in Wisconsin members and $70 for non-members. Available at rightinwisconsin.org. It's absolutely worth your time to do it. So please do go to their website and check the tour out. If you're in our area, it's a great experience. So we encourage you to attend. And now on to our lecturer and speaker today. An avid admirer of Frank Lloyd Wright's work, Robert Hartnett is the author of Frank Lloyd Wright's $10,000 Home, History, Design, and Restoration of the Bach House. He has volunteered with the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust as a multi-site tour guide in Chicago and Oak Park, Illinois. His publication with Master Wings grew out of his belief that the role of architecture in our communities and the history of the Bach House in particular is an important topic that should be shared in engaging and informative ways. In addition to architectural writing, Bob is a gardener and craftsman. He lives in Illinois with his wife and family. So Bob, I'd like to welcome you today. Thanks so much for joining us and talking about the Bach House.
Okay, thank you, Heather, for a nice introduction. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'd like to share with you some of the facts about the history and restoration of the Bach House. I would also like to talk to you about how it's been restored. Now, the Bach House is located up in Rogers Park in Chicago. Rogers Park was founded in 1878 and then annexed into Chicago in 1893. It's bordered on the east by Lake Michigan and on the north by the city of Evanston, Illinois. Now, we sometimes joke about this here in our area about how Chicago got its name, but the story that everyone thinks is probably true is it's named after the onion, the stinky onion found in the swampland along Lake Michigan. Now, certainly the city was growing until 1871 when the Chicago fire struck. And it really was certainly a disaster, consuming over 17,000 buildings. Over 300 people lost their lives. And the city was, oh, that was Bessie saying it wasn't her. I'm not sure if people caught that reference or not. But the city was certainly in shambles after the fire. And one of the regulations that was instituted was that no wood buildings would be allowed to be built in the downtown area. So as the construction of the city began, reconstruction, I should say, that brick, stone were only buildings allowed in the downtown area. In 1874, there was actually a second fire, and this fire was not nearly as big as the 1871 fire, but it did burn out when it hit the downtown area. So the decision was made to extend what they called the fire limit further out into the city. And this had 2 unlikely consequences of bringing the people that designed and built the Bach House together in Chicago. First, we had William Bach, Emil Bach's father. Him and his wife and family moved from Germany to Chicago in 1881 and settling in the Lakeview neighborhood when they first arrived. William was a brickmaker already, and after settling his home, he opened up a couple of different brickyards. The first one was in an area called Bricktown, and then they moved up to Roscoe Village, then moved south to an area called Bucktown, and then moved quite a bit north to the Ravenswood Garden area. And then finally, the last brickyard was at Montrose and the Chicago River. That green area that you see in the map where it says park, that land was all at one time the Bach brickyard. It's now Horner Park for those of you that live in the Chicago area. Now, this is Emil and Anna on their wedding day, and then this is one of the Bach bricks that they were making. You can see it has this orange, kind of pinkish color to it, and it was a style of brick that Wright did not care for at all. He did not like the color of these bricks and refused to use them in the Bach House. So there are no Bach bricks in the Bach House, which is kind of ironic. The photograph you see here is from a magazine article from 1913, the American Clay magazine. And they did an expose on the Bach family, talked about how friendly the guys were, talked about their expertise as making bricks. They even had a couple of patents for some new brick making techniques that they developed at their yard. Now, Wright was working for Adams & Sullivan, and he moved away from that firm in 1893, and he wanted to establish his own independent practice. Wright eventually led what became known as the Prairie School of Architecture. The Prairie School flourished during the late 19th century and early 20th century, and most common in the Midwestern parts of the United States. The style is marked by horizontal lines, flat hip roofs, and broad overhanging eaves, windows grouped in horizontal bands, and integration with the landscape. The horizontal lines were thought to evoke and relate to the flat, wide prairie of the American landscape. The term Prairie School was coined by H. Allen Brooks, one of the first architectural historians to write extensively about the movement and its work. The arts and crafts movement and the Prairie style have a lot of similarities. The arts and crafts movement started in Britain and flourished in Europe and North America between 1880 and 1920. It stood for traditional craftsmanship using simple forms and often used medieval, romantic, or folk styles of decoration. It had a strong influence on the arts in Europe until it was displaced by modernism in the 1930s. The term arts and crafts was first used by T.J. Sanderson at a meeting of the Arts and Crafts Exhibition Society in 1887. Although the principles and style on which it was based had been developed in England for the last 20 years. The arts and crafts movement was largely a reaction against the perceived impoverishment of the decorative arts at the time and the conditions in which they were being produced. So here is the shores of Lake Michigan on the northern part of Chicago, where the Rogers Park is located now today. When Emil's older brother Otto was looking for a home, he decided to make his way up to Rogers Park. He purchased what was called the Stefan House. The Stefan House was designed by Franklin Wright in 1909 and purchased by Otto and his wife Louise in 1912. The year 1909 was the same year that the Roby House was designed and built. So you can imagine this home had many of the same characteristics of a fully developed prairie style house. In 1935, Otto passed away and Louise decided to move out of the house and rented it to a restaurateur and established the King Arms restaurant. The restaurant was in business until the early 1960s when after Louise passed away, the property was sold. Now, sometimes you'll hear in a news broadcast that the following slide is set, maybe difficult for people who are more sensitive. So this is what this is what the Stefan's house looks like today. It's one large apartment complex building. There was also a second home in Rogers Park called the Horner House. This was from 1908, and it was another prairie style house based on the Fireproof House for $5,000 article from 1907. The house also has some similarities to the Laurel Gale House that is down in Oak Park. So Emil would have had an opportunity to see and look at both of these houses before he decided to have his house built. The Horner House was taken down, and it's now a small apartment building in Rogers Park. It was taken down in 1962. So the origins of the Bach House. Well, the house is on just off the shores of Lake Michigan in Rogers Park on Sheridan Road. And we also have this architectural study done in 1911. And this drawing exhibits several of the features that we find in the Bach House. Even Bruce Brooks Pfeiffer had said that this drawing emulates the Bach House. The Bach House was designed off the $5,000 house article, as well as several other houses Wright had done in the early 1910s. We also found some of the features of Midway Gardens represented in the Bach House, the front facade specifically that we have at the house. Now, this is one of the presentation drawings that Wright had created for the Bach House. You can see it has a flat roof, the overhanging eaves, the trellis system with the flowers, some arc glass windows. And you can see also it's this Uoki style of drawing that Wright was so fond of in the Japanese culture. We also have some influence of nature. You know, Wright was a big proponent of nature. For Frank Lloyd Wright, God and nature were synonymous. We also have some very Japanese elements included in the house. The first one being the genkin. And the genkin is a lower doorway. So the main entryway of the Bach House is about 4 steps below the main floor. This would allow a servant or butler to go to the door and answer it and keep the family somewhat protected. There's also a takomana. This is an area in a Japanese home that would be where a treasured piece of artwork, a family heirloom would be placed. You might find a Japanese scroll here as well. Maybe a flower with a vase with some flowers in it. So a very important part of a Japanese home. And then the third item we see here is the kimone. This is that brown board that's up at the top of the wall that separates the yellow paint below and the white plaster above. The purpose of this is to help expand the height of the rooms and make them feel larger than what they are. The entire first floor of the house has this board around the perimeter, and we also see it in the rooms on the second floor as well. Now, this is another one of the presentation drawings that Wright had created. And the thing that's interesting about this drawing is we can see, and I know it may be difficult on the screen, but there are several scribble marks on certain features. And then there's also other items drawn in. I'll go over those now. So the original entryway was in this section right here. And the way the house is situated, north is to the left, south to the right. So the house entryway would have been from the south. But you can see right here, there's a new doorway added that faces east. And this is where the door is today. We also have up here on the landing to the second floor, a set of stairs drawn in on the exterior of the house. This set of stairs leads to the second floor sun porch. So this item would not have been part of the original design, but added later, probably during a meeting with the Bach family and Wright, or possibly John Lloyd Wright, who was working for his father at that time. These fences on the north side are scribbled out. And when the fences on the north side were removed, they were allowed to move the house towards the north property line so that the south line had more yard space. Some new fences were drawn in on both the north and south side. And then the ingle nook has a little bit different design than what the original drawing had. This presentation drawing does not include the exterior stairs that are on both the north and south side of the house. And finally, there is a little drawing up here that looks like it's some stairs coming down from either the second floor porch or the first floor screen porch. This was never completed, so it's not part of the restoration, but it was drawn on the plans. Now, Owen Bach, Emil Bach's grandson, provided originally Jane Fear and then followed up by giving me a copy of these letters as well. These are letters, the first letter that we have is from John Lloyd Wright. It talks about the price of the home as being $9,026. Now the Bachs must not have been happy with that price, because the letter goes on to say that the porches and in fact the garage could also be eliminated, and then they could be built at a later date for additional cost of around $700. Well, I'm not sure how the Bachs answered this letter, but in February 18th of 1915, Frank Lloyd Wright writes the Bachs a letter, and it is addressed from Los Angeles. So Wright is in Los Angeles, California at this time, and he states that John has told them that the full price of the house is $9,700, but he talks about how the contractor is a good contractor, that he feels it's a good deal. He he mentions about some of the built-in furniture that he's included, so that they're not going to have to go out and buy new furniture for the house. But he closes in saying that if you really want to, I can create a whole new set of plans for you. And he kind of, he doesn't really threaten them, but he kind of says, well, if you really want this, I'll do it. And remember, the Bachs were living on the Brickyard property at the time that they were talking about building a new home. The Brickyard property would probably not be a very pleasant place to live. Very, very dirty, very dusty. They did have one son. He was a young boy. Probably a little bit dangerous place for him to be playing when he was outside. Now, there was another letter from Frank Lloyd Wright, and here the price of the house is $10,000. So it's gone up again about $300. But again, Wright is talking about the chairs he's included, again, he mentions the built-in furniture, and that he's very eager to get going on this job. Well, the final contract, which again was given to us by Owen Bach, states that the final price of the construction was $10,650. So each time the idea of the price of the house came up, it went up a little bit. So we could see that Wright was using his personality to talk the Bachs into building a more expensive house than they probably ever planned to. Now, what the very final cost was after they moved in, we don't know, but we do know that the contract was for $10,650. Now, when I was doing the research on the book, there was some discussion about who the contractor for the house was. Was it Henry Hulting or this man, James Wigington? Well, Henry Hulting is mentioned in the letters from Frank Lloyd Wright that he is one of the better contractors on the North Shore. And Hulting has signed off on the blueprints that we see here to the right. James Wigington was a cement contractor and did sewer work. So he was probably a subcontractor for Henry Hulting. Now, on the blueprints, which I found a copy of these blueprints at the Ryerson Library at the Art Institute of Chicago. So if you ever want to go there and check them out, you can do that and look at the original plans yourself. But they're signed off by Henry Hulting and Emil Bach. And the purpose or the idea for the contractor and the owner signing the plans is we have the idea that the contractor saying, well, I'm going to build you your house just like these plans say. And the owner is saying, well, that's good because that's exactly what I want. Now, if we look closely at this page from the blueprints, we'll see Henry Hulting's signature, Emil Bach's signature. They're both very clear. But I would ask, do you see the third signature that's on the paper here? Well, the third signature is right over here to the left, and that's Frank Lloyd Wright's signature, the square inside a square. Here's a photograph of Theodore Bach, their Emil and Anna's son, and then Anna Bach over to the right. The idea with these two photographs, Theodore went to the University of Illinois, which is shown over on the right-hand photograph. That's where he met his wife, and he was married in June of 1929. What happens later in 1929, October of 29, that we have the stock market crash, really changes the Bach's life. If you're a brick making company and we're in the height of the Depression, there's not much building going on. So Emil and Anna decided to sell their home in 1934, and they moved out to Southern California, where Anna's family was originally from. The next couple of years, we had 3 different owners. We don't believe there were many changes to the house during this time. However, in the 1951 and 1959 era, as Dr. Emanuel Weiss owned the home. And we believe it was him that added the cover over the second floor porch and built in the screen porch below. You know, if you think about American life during the 1950s, what was one of the biggest changes to American life? Well, the advent of the television. Not only did we need to have a television, we had to have its own special room, den or family room. But that's what the first floor porch became for the Weisses. In 1959, a man named James Blender buys the house, and he's there about 11 years. He did sell the house to his father's company. They held the mortgage on it during 1970, and I'll talk about that a little more in just a second. But during the time that James Blender had lived there, he started to upgrade the electrical system. He made some repairs to the furnace system. He replaced the roof to correct the eventual roof leaks that seem to be plagued each and every Wright house. But one of the things he did that really changed the look of the Bach house was to take down the house that's on the right-hand side of the photograph and left a vacant lot. And since the 1970s, that lot, the vacant lot, has been sold with the Bach house. So you always get a big open expanse there. Now, in 1978, I mentioned the Blender Building Corporation held the mortgage on the house when Frank Miller purchased it. In 1978, he was getting ready to sell the house. And this newspaper article from the Chicago Sun-Times talked about how this would be a great deal, that you could buy the house, buy the vacant lot, tear the house down and put up an apartment building and get a very good return on your investment. Well, Frank Miller was aghast at that idea. He did not want that to happen at all. He had enjoyed his time in living in the Bach house and actually sought out landmark status for the house, which probably saved the house at that time. Now, after he sold it, we had 2 owners over the next 27 years. We had the Benucci's and Reze Ptolemy. When the Benucci's lived there, and you notice that they lived there the longest, they made some very significant changes to the house. During the 1980s, they actually gutted the house, took all the plaster out of the house and replaced it with drywall. I'm not sure why they did that, but that was their house at that time. But I guess they had a perfect right to do that. They also decided to put a addition on the back of the house. Their thought was that they were going to tear down the second floor porch, remove the first floor porch, and add a very large addition to the property. But since the house had been landmarked, they were not allowed to do that. So the house did stay in its configuration after 1959. When Talabi was getting ready to sell the house in 2005, he had actually moved out of the house, and the house was vacant for a couple of years. And that's why he decided to try selling it at auction. He had it listed for sale, but was not getting many offers. So in 2005, there was an auction, and Jane Fear ended up being the owner. And I don't know what the final price she paid for the house was, but it was stated by the auction manager that the final price was well above the $750,000 it was listed at. And then in 2010, in 2010, Tawani Enterprise buys the house from Jane Fear, and they work together to continue the restoration process that Jane Fear has started. Jane Fear had wanted to remove cabinets and fixtures, remove the paint from the brick on the interior, and she also added the tea house. Jane Fear had spent some time in Japan and wanted to have this little tea house built. And originally it was a spa. It held a changing room and a lap pool. Today, the photograph on top, today it's more of a used for leisure. The lap pool has been taken out. Now, next we have some photographs of what the house looked like in 2005 when Jane Fear purchased it. You can see the front of the house on the left. On the rear of the house, there's a large concrete patio. This was not original. We see that the angle nook has been taken out. That's a really large change to the interior of the house. There is a dining table here, but this is not the original dining table. On the left is one of the bedrooms from the Bach House. You can see that the art glass windows have been removed. Each of the bedrooms had a set of 2 art glass windows, and those were all taken out during the time that Mr. Blinder owned the house. The photograph on the right is shot from the living room towards the screen porch. Here's the screen porch on the left, which, like I said, is now the TV room, and then the second floor sun deck becomes another bedroom. When Tawani purchased the house, not only did they do an extensive restoration of the building, they also came up with a scheme to enhance the yard and created this landscaping plan that really, what should I say? It makes the 2 yards flow together. You don't really notice that they're 2 separate lots now that the landscape plan has been put into effect. Now, here's a little video of some of the challenges that the restoration people had to take. You can see here that the mantle above the fireplace is painted. The bricks were painted as well. Now, the next video that we're going to see is the house after the restoration was complete. But I want to point out one item that's really important. On the left-hand side, as you look through the doorway, That is the view of the lake. Directly behind the Bach House, there are two apartment buildings. On the left, there's about a 20-story building. And then directly behind the house is a 3-story building. But we still have a view of the lake in that little opening on the left-hand side. So here's a look at the house after it's been restored. Here's another one of the photographs that we received from Owen Bach, and this is the dining table during the time his parents or his grandparents had lived there. Today, the house is used for a couple of different uses. First off, Tawani has hosted several of these summer events where they'll have some music brought in and hors d'oeuvres that people can enjoy. The house can be rented for weddings, receptions, corporate parties, and also it's used as a vacation rental. When Tawani took over the house, one of the large considerations they had to deal with was the second floor porch and the first floor porch. They were both enclosed, that we have talked about. And to bring the house back to its 1915 appearance, those areas had to be brought back, and they were willing to do that. So that was really great. Now, the house is part of the houses and buildings that are in Chicago. And sorry, I got to get to the right place of my notes. I apologize. The Frank Lloyd Wright Trail goes through Illinois and Wisconsin. And we talk about Wright's work being well represented in Illinois, from Lake County to the north to the state capital of Springfield, and also between Chicago and Rockford. There's buildings in 23 different communities designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. These buildings range in age from 1892 to 1959 and include several different types of buildings as well, including homes, churches, and commercial properties. Some of Wright's most famous buildings are in Illinois, including Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio, Unity Temple, and the Roby House, which is in Chicago. The Bach House is significant because it is designed during the time of Wright's career, when he's moving away from his designs of the prairie, and when he leaves the Midwest for California and then later Japan. When he returns from Japan, he changes American architecture again with the textile block houses and the Usonian homes. Some of the ideas for these homes can be seen in the Bach House: the compact spaces, the built-in furniture, the flat roofs, and the removal of unnecessary features. But the Bach House is still a beautiful little building with its open and flowing first floor, its natural colors of walnut and maple wood, and Wright's ability to make the transition from inside to out seamless. So I'd like to thank all of you for attending the presentation today. And we're certainly be able to answer any questions anybody may have. And also, Tawani Enterprises making this offer today to use this email to purchase the book, if you so desire, for a 20% discount. And I'll kind of segue into something that Heather mentioned, the Write and Like tour, which is going to be at the end of the month. I'll actually be involved in that tour. I'll be at the Lamp House, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright building. And so if anyone wants to buy one of the books and attend the Write and Like tour, I'll be you can search me out. I'll be glad to sign your book for you if that's something you would like. So Heather, I'll turn it back to you and we'll answer any questions we may have.
Thank you so much, Bob. Wonderful presentation, and appreciate that you're volunteering for the Write and Like event. That's terrific. The Bach House truly is a gem. And Bob, do you know if one were to inquire about access to the house or tours, what is the current accessibility there?
Well, right now, from what I understand, the only tour that's available is through the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust. They have a tour called Right Along the Lake, where you start out in the morning at the Rookery, and then they have a coach bus that goes down to the Roby House, where you're given a full tour of the Roby House, and you're included a lunch. And then from there, you'll drive up to the Bach House, have a tour of that house, and then afterwards return back to the Rookery, which is in downtown Chicago.
Oh, okay, very good. So that's through the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Well, I do have a few questions, if you wouldn't mind, Bob, taking some of these.
Sure.
The first one is, how many square feet is the home?
I knew somebody was going to ask that. I have to double check. Because it's kind of a changing number, but it's around 2,700 square feet.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Glenn asks, do you know if Wright or one of his sons supervised construction?
You know, I did try to research that and I just couldn't get a definitive answer. I believe Wright was not in Illinois at the time of the building. So I'm assuming it was John Lloyd Wright, but I can't say for sure.
Okay, very good. And by the way, if you are new to Zoom webinar format, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in a question. Rob asks that, well, he says interior wall and ceiling colors seem very light or white. Is that correct?
Yes, the ceiling is unpainted plaster, so just white plaster. And the wall coloring throughout the house is what it was a special mix of paint that Wright called sunshine yellow. During the restoration process, they did quite extensive work at getting down to the original colors by investigating any areas of the original plaster that were left. And of course, there's a little funny story that I'm not sure if you people recognize the name Tim Samuelson, but he was the Chicago historian, and he's retired now. But back in the 80s, when the home was being remodeled and the original plaster was being taken out, Tim Samuelson happened to be walking by the house and actually entered the house on his own. He was not too happy. The people were pulling out all this original plaster, and he kind of chastised them for that. And they were like, well, hey, this is our house, you know, mind your own business. But he did pick up a piece of plaster and he saved it. They were able to use the piece that he had from 1983, along with some original plaster areas they found in the house, to match that original yellow color.
So perhaps a little lighter yellow than some of the, more mustard yellows we associate with some of those prairie houses? That's hard to say, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah,
when you're talking about
I wouldn't
color.
say mustard, more a lemony yellow.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Frank asks, what type of bricks were used? They don't look like Roman bricks used on several earlier homes.
No, they're not Roman brick. It's a conventional size brick, manufactured probably from a company in Ohio called the Blended Brick Company.
Not the Bach brick, to
Not
be clear.
They did find some Bach bricks in the garage walls. So that kind of proves the idea that the garage was probably built after the house. And they did use some of their own bricks there.
Lee asks, what is yearly maintenance in terms of days and cost to keep property in good shape?
Boy, I don't know. But I would assume, like any house, it does need to be updated, needs to be painted. But I don't know the costs that they incur at this time.
Mhm. We have not a name attached to the profile of the account, just a Zoom user that is letting us know he lives across from the lamp house, or she. So maybe you'll see them at Right and Like.
Oh, good.
So what happened to the original stained glass windows from the Bach House?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. As I mentioned, James Blinder had owned the house, and he kept one himself. He gave one to the Art Institute of Chicago. He gave one to the playwright, Edward Albee. And one ended up in a private collection by an owner in British Columbia. And the others were not sure. There's 4 windows that we know where they went, but the other 2 we're not sure. The one, Albee passed away a couple of years ago, prior to the pandemic, and his window was sold at auction, also to a private collector.
Okay. Mark wants to comment that they stayed at the Bach House last year, and it was the cherry on top of their right to our vacation. Enjoyed the presentation. Grace says, I visited the house many years ago. I recall seeing a built-in desk in one of the bedrooms. Is that original? And is all of the right design furniture back in place?
Well, I'll kind of answer it backwards. Yes, the original furniture is back in place, but it's no longer original. All that furniture had been taken out over the years, but they did go through great pains to use the original plans that they received from Taliesin to recreate the furniture. And it's there is a makeup table that's in one of the bedrooms, and then there was another desk made by I forget the gentleman's name now, but that desk is not in the house any longer. It was not original to the house. It was I think it's at the Tawani offices, but I know it's not in the house any longer.
Mm. Is there a plan to have any of the stained glass windows remade?
Oh, yes. I guess I should have mentioned that. They have all been remade and replaced with reproduction glass. And they used the original from James Blinder as a model to recreate the pattern and color of the glass. So each of the bedrooms had 2 more ornate art glass windows. And I don't know if you remember in the one video, there's the first floor art glass windows are still original. So those are still there. It was the second floor windows that were taken out.
Mm. Oh, thank you for the clarification there. Here's a simple question that is stated: oil or stain? Maybe not simple answer, but
Oh, probably for the woodwork around the house?
I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, it's neither, actually. It's all the wood trim in the house is walnut and just polished with a wax material to give it that unique look to it. So it's not stained at all.
Hmm. Steve says, I'm curious about the surrounding buildings. Is there pressure or a history of pressure from developers to invest in the land the house occupies?
Well, I suppose back in the 1970s when Miller was getting ready to sell it, there was probably some interest in doing that. In an urban setting like this, land use is really, especially to having an open lot next to the house. But since that time that it's become landmark, I don't believe any of that. I don't think there's much they can do to invest in that property now.
Mhm.
And let me clarify, the landmark status only applies to the Bach House. The vacant lot next door is not under the landmark requirements. So something could be built there.
Okay. Alan says, where in California did the Bachs move to? He's asking from San Diego. He has a local interest.
Yeah, Southern California. Oh boy, let me see if I can pull that out of the memory bank. I don't recall. I know it was Southern California though.
Okay. Might involve a little history and from the San Diego attendee here. We'll dig in. Todd asks, was there a need to replace any masonry? And if so, how was it sourced? He says, thank you for the photo of the alma mater. I always thought it was by the Union and not by the auditorium.
Okay. Well, the Harbo architects who did the major work on the restoration contacted the Blendon Brick Company, who was actually still in business. And they worked pretty closely with them to recreate the Bach bricks. And what they decided to do, any repairs that were required to the house, they took those old bricks out and replaced them with bricks from the walls, the brick walls that are in the on the property. So the house has all original bricks, but those walls have reproduction bricks.
Okay.
I had a chance to interview Gunny Harbo, who was the president of Harbo Architects, and he said one of the most difficult things was to get the right, and this is, I guess, a technical term that they use in architecture, the right goobery effect on the bricks.
Are you saying goober like Goober?
Yeah.
Oh, funny. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a technical term, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, in a related question, Greg asks, what were the restoration costs in the 80s and in 2005? Do you know, Bob?
The 1980s, I'm not sure, but the restoration was well over $1 million, but the exact figure I'm not sure. When Jane Fear owned the house, I talked to her construction manager, and he mentioned a couple of things, but one of the things that struck me as really interesting, they did a paint analysis that cost $250. Harbo Architects did a similar paint analysis, but it cost $2,500. So you can imagine the level of detail Harbo put into it versus the previous contractors.
Oh, interesting. Like anything else, it's various levels of of quality work, I suppose, huh?
Yeah, when the decision was made to pull out all the drywall and replace it with original plaster as best they could, that was certainly an expensive decision. And having a few pieces of the original plaster left, they were able to recreate that sand coat finish that Wright was famous for.
This person asks, why did they remove the windows and give them away? I had the impression, though, Bob, you meant that one owner took one with him in the course of this, so it wasn't as though they were all removed at the same time. Is that right?
No, they probably were removed during the same owner during that 10 years. He had told me that most of the windows were broken and damaged to a certain extent, so they had to be replaced anyways. And the cost, he wasn't going to restore the house, so the cost to try and repair these art glass windows would have been more than he would have chosen to put forward.
Gotcha. Bruce asks, have there been any copies of this house made in the US or in the world? It's a masterpiece.
Well, there are several versions of the fireproof house that have features of the fireproof house. But I don't think there's not one house that matches the article exactly.
Right.
And I don't think there's any other, as far as I know, I don't think there's any other duplicates of the Bach House out there.
Okay. Let's see. A personal question, not really personal. Are you a historian, architect, or enthusiast?
I'll have to say enthusiast.
Historian when it comes to the Bach House, though.
I guess, yeah.
Don't sell
I do know a
yourself short.
lot. I do know a lot about it.
I have a question here that's kind of interesting. Was the Bach family any connection or lineage to the Johann Sebastian Bach family?
According to Owen, again, the grandson, he said that he did some research into their family tree, and the family is related to Johann Bach.
Is not?
No, is. They
Oh,
are.
is. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you know what the current value of the house is today, Bob?
You know, I do not. I do not.
This is a question from Greg that actually came up with someone this morning. I was chatting in the office, another Wright fan who hears the name Bach and thinks of the house in Milwaukee, which is spelled differently. It's a different family.
Yeah.
That house is B-O-G-K, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Bach.
Right.
And that house was built the year after the Bach House.
Similar looking, though.
Similar looking.
Uh-huh.
On the exterior, the interiors are very different, though.
Okay. Were the walls restored to plaster as part of the renovation?
Yes.
Okay.
The walls and ceilings.
I have a question that's on another Wright topic about his prefabricated homes, and I can respond to it because it's a little bit of a local question, but maybe you have something to add, Bob. It's about prefabricated homes in the Midwest, and Frank Lloyd Wright did a few of those here in Madison with a construction partner. His name was Marshall Erdman.
Yes.
So we have some nice examples of prefabricated homes here in Madison, which you can see on that Wright and Like tour, actually. So it's a nice segue to be able to mention that one more time. The Wright and Like tour is, as a reminder, is July 30th here in Madison, and it's a fundraiser for the group Wright in Wisconsin. Go to their website for tickets, wrightinwisconsin.org, and go to the Lamp House and see Bob in person. And also we want to mention, and by the way, Bob, I'm getting some nice compliments through the Q&A for your presentation. So
thank you.
You know, it's both questions and positive feedback. We also want to make note of the fine book that Bob authored with the cover here on the screen. So we want to encourage you to get the discount that was graciously provided to us from the publisher Master Wings. So that's a nice thing to be able to do that for our audience. We had 175 people on the Zoom today, Bob, which is
great.
So it was wonderful to chat with you about this house, and knowing you're in Madison in a couple weeks, I will stop by and say hello.
Okay, great.
To encourage our visitors and locally to do that as well. And also, audience, thank you so much. We appreciate that you joined us in summer, a time that is sometimes busy or at least distracting and with weather and outdoor activities. So it's wonderful to have you all with us today. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.